I'll never forget the feel of that sticky Dallas heat the autumn afternoon my life flipped upside down. Most folks in Highland Park spent their days chatting about city council or what charity event was next, but that day, every single whisper in the room was about me, Javier Ortiz, the helps kid who suddenly had his name stitched into the glitzy fabric of a family's fortune. When I walked up those marble steps, my sneakers squeaked where loafers usually glided. My hands shook, but I kept them pressed to my sides, not wanting anyone to see how rattled I was. The Sullivan mansion smelled like jasmine from Mrs. Sullivan's prized rose garden, petals scattered on white linen, echoing the fragility and beauty of secrets that were about to unravel. My heart hammered against my ribs as I looked out at a crowd full of well-heeled relatives, neighbors, and local faces from the business section of the Dallas Morning News. Old Man Sullivan, Mr. George to me, but Dad now, apparently, sat in his favorite leather chair, silver hair glinting in the late afternoon sun. His lawyer stood nervously beside him, a folder marked Final Will and Testament trembling in her hands. I'd seen those folders before: IRS audits, disputes over probate, endless stories of families torn apart by money. But this was my story now. "Thank you all for coming," the lawyer started, trying to sound confident as she motioned for silence. Every cough, every scrape of a chair sent shivers down my back. I glanced over at Mrs. Sullivan. She was gripping her pearls so tight I thought they might snap. When the lawyer said, "Mr. Ortiz has been named the principal heir," it felt like the air got sucked right out of the room. Gasps, muttered protests, a stifled laugh from Cousin Lucy. I could feel cold stares boring holes into my skin, as if someone had just crowned me king of a land I'd only ever mowed and watered. Then my name popped up on a local news alert, and I swear my knees buckled. "Unexpected twist in the Sullivan estate," the anchor announced, showing my face, half smile, half terror, beside Mr. Sullivan's stoic portrait. That moment, I knew things would never be the same. I tried to focus on the roses outside, those symbols of hope and pain, but the family's muttering kept pulling me back. Mrs. Sullivan whispered something that sounded like, "Everything he's touched will wilt." Voices around me sharpened. "He's not one of us. Just a worker." Unbelievable. I felt more alone than ever, but at the same time, something inside me started to burn. Maybe pride, maybe stubbornness, maybe the first stirrings of courage. It didn't take long for the real games to begin. Right after the will was read, my phone buzzed with texts from people I hadn't seen in years. "Is it true? How much did you get?" Stuff I couldn't answer. But I had bigger problems. Behind the scenes, the Sullivan family was scheming. I could hear footsteps down the dim hallway. I caught glances traded across the living room that didn't feel harmless. Then I heard the first plan. A whispered conversation in the kitchen where Mrs. Sullivan told her son Drew, "We need to fix this. Call the family association." My heart thudded. In Highland Park, cliques ran deep, and reputation was currency. It dawned on me. This wasn't about money. It was about who belonged, about who got to call the shots. My vulnerability wasn't hidden. I was the gardener's kid, raised by a mother who fixed meals in the mansion's kitchen and kept her head down. My Spanish accent never quite faded, and my clothes always set me apart. Now, I was at the heart of a storm, with little more than the trust Mr. Sullivan had placed in me and the skills I'd learned navigating Dallas's divided neighborhoods. As the crowd began to thin, I steeled myself, replaying Mr. Sullivan's last words. "They'll come after you, Javier, but you know this place better than any of them." With the night closing in, the rose garden glowed soft under porch lights, just like the hope I was clinging to. If all this was some twisted trap, I needed to stay sharp. I'd grown up watching how secrets were hidden among neighbors here. Sweet tea shared on porches, barbecues masking simmering resentments. I understood how quiet gossip could devastate as much as a public scandal. I walked out to Main Street that evening, my sneakers dusty from the mansion's marble. I kept recalling people's faces from that afternoon, their shocked expressions, their angry whispers. I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching, waiting to see me stumble. On the curb, I called my mother. Her voice, steady, loving, but worried, reminded me why I had to fight, why I couldn't let them drive me out. "Javi, you belong there. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Back in bed, I lay awake, replaying every look and word from that day. Were these folks planning my downfall while I wrestled with my own doubts? Would my new place as heir be a blessing or a curse? But then I saw something strange. Two figures silhouetted in the moonlight, huddling by the rose bushes as if plotting. I snapped a quick photo on my phone, just in case. That night, I realized the real challenge wasn't surviving the scandal, but unraveling the web of secrets my inheritance had exposed. This was just the beginning, what nobody had counted on. I was ready for the fight, ready to dig up every root, every hidden truth, no matter how deep they buried it. If you've never been to Highland Park, you wouldn't know how power works there. Most outsiders picture lazy afternoons, garden parties with lemonade pitchers and the occasional parade on Main Street. But deep down, Highland Park is an iron fortress, where reputation shapes everything and alliances are built behind closed doors. That evening, I learned just how quickly those doors could slam shut. I got the first real glimpse of the conspiracy when Cousin Drew texted me, "You should lay low for a while, man." Not a threat, not quite concern, more like the kind of warning you'd give someone about a forecasted thunderstorm. I stared out my window at the orange glow from the lampposts, wondering just how many of these neighbors saw me as nothing more than an intruder, walking on their manicured lawns. The next morning, I heard whispers, like wind rustling through oak trees. The Highland Park Homeowners Association, somehow more intimidating than City Council, had called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, obviously. From what I gathered, Mrs. Sullivan wasted no time. She had mobilized the inner circle, the tight-knit group who set the tone for every garden party, fundraiser, and board election. The stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. A text leaked from that meeting. "He's not our kind. We need a plan." I shouldn't have cared about their plans, but something about the way those folks looked at me, the head shakes, the not-so-secret glances, started to get under my skin. When you grow up shadowed by wealth, you learn to read body language. This wasn't just gossip, it was the start of a battle. I left my house late in the afternoon, nerves humming. Walking down Beverly Drive, I counted 10 security cameras. Just last week, those cameras watched for porch pirates. Now, I felt they were watching me. I ducked into a small diner off Knox Street, hoping for anonymity. Instead, I found more stares. Locals whispered into coffee cups, some pretending not to see me, others making sure I saw them. I overheard, "That Mexican kid, Javier, thinks he owns Highland Park now," followed by laughter that cut cold. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through social media. Everything was blowing up. Your Sullivan scandal trended locally, and some posts came with photos of me pulling weeds last summer. "Guess this is the new face of Dallas money," read one. The sting slapped harder than any physical insult, but I forced myself not to react. My mom texted again, "Stay strong, mijo, we're with you." I clung to her words like a lifeline. Meanwhile, rumors snowballed. By the time I got home, Mrs. Sullivan's people had already contacted the local paper. An article dropped later that evening. Sullivan Estate faces unprecedented challenge. Outsider heir sparks division. My photo, grainy and unflattering, sat right next to headlines about county fair drama and a high school football rivalry gone bad. Back inside my room, I could hear Drew on the phone, voice muffled but urgent. "We have to disqualify him," he said, words flying through the thin walls. The plan, I discovered through a string of backdoor texts, was to push me out using technicalities. The Homeowners Association rules, banking regulations, even old rumors about my mother. It was all on the table. I sat on my bed, shoes off, toes curling against cold tile, running through my options. That night, my vulnerability felt sharper than ever. I was the outsider. 25 years old, raised in a world that taught me humility first and hope second. I didn't have their old money, their country club roots, their lawyers on retainer, but I had something every gardener knows: patience. Every rose, every blade of grass taught me not to fear slow growth. Just when it felt unbearable, I remembered Mr. Sullivan's last advice, scribbled inside a gardening book he gave me. "They think unity is power, Javi. Sometimes division is stronger." That line stuck, echoing in my head as I watched the neighborhood's finest unravel under pressure. As day bled into night, the conspiracy took shape in living rooms and boardrooms. Mrs. Sullivan assembled her allies, a local banker, an attorney, and even a PTA officer. They drafted a plan to freeze assets until I could be properly scrutinized. A friend from my old high school texted, "You need proof they're plotting." I thought of the photo I'd snapped near the rose bushes last night. The circle grew tighter, but so did my resolve. I pulled out that photo, zoomed in, and noticed something odd. Mrs. Sullivan speaking to someone I barely recognized, a man with a badge clipped to his belt. Was he from the local credit union? IRS? My gut twisted. If they wanted to play in the big leagues, so could I. In this neighborhood, power was currency, but secrets were king. The inner circle believed that by controlling the narrative, they could force me out. But I started to wonder, what if their own secrets came to light? I spent the night researching their past off Google, scrolling through old property records, campaign donations, anything I could pin to their names. Hook. Neighbors whispered. Associations schemed. But I was done playing by their rules. I realized that Highland Park's inner circle might be unbreakable from the outside, but every fortress has weak spots. All I needed was a crack in their armor, a misstep, a slip of truth, and the right moment to act. The countdown to the public announcement ticked closer. The deadline was set at the opening ceremony of the Dallas County Fair, 2 weeks away. If they succeeded in shutting me out before then, I'd lose everything. Inheritance, dignity, my mother's pride. If I could hang on just long enough, maybe I'd finally change what belonging means in this town. They believed unity gave them power. What they didn't know, division can be the most dangerous weapon of all. They say news travels fast in Dallas, but when the Sullivan scandal hit, it spread like wildfire. I woke up that morning to my phone vibrating nonstop, texts from numbers I didn't recognize, links to articles I never imagined would exist. Overnight, I'd gone from the quiet kid watering roses to the headline everyone in town wanted to dissect. It started with a push from Mrs. Sullivan's camp. The local paper, the Dallas Observer, ran an article that came dangerously close to character assassination. Their headline screamed, "Sullivan's Secret, Outsider Heir Sparks Uproar." My last name was spelled wrong, and my mother's story retrofitted to sound like some soap opera subplot, as if her devotion had been nothing more than opportunism. I stared at the screen, chest tight. The article quoted anonymous family insiders making claims about my education, habits, even a supposed incident with last year's bank statement. I hadn't realized how quickly misinformation could take root, like weeds in the garden I used to tend. At first, I didn't know how to fight back. My mother, always calm under pressure, suggested, "Go outside, breathe, let them tire themselves out." But the news cycle was relentless. I walked to the diner on Main Street, hoping for peace. But inside, the TV was tuned to a talk show dissecting the will. The host smirked. "Who does this kid think he is?" A pair of waitresses traded glances, texting under the counter. In that moment, I felt the public humiliation. For the first time, my story wasn't my own anymore. Mrs. Sullivan apparently fed more than roses. Rumors multiplied. Someone said I'd falsified documents. Another suggested my mother had overshared with Mr. Sullivan. The worst part? My old friend Brandon sent a screenshot from Facebook, a meme featuring my high school photo and the tag, "American Dream Betrayed." Every time I checked social media, new ones popped up. Posts, parody videos, even a Twitter poll about whether I deserved the inheritance. Still, not everyone bought the drama. In the middle of that storm, a direct message hit my inbox. It was from Natalie Cruz, a journalist for Channel 8 who'd covered more than her share of family feuds and neighborhood scandals. "I know what a setup looks like," her message read. "Want to talk?" I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. We agreed to meet at a nearby cafe that afternoon. Natalie arrived with a notepad and a sense of disillusionment. She asked questions that no one else bothered with. "What's your real connection to Mr. Sullivan? Why do you think they're trying so hard to push you out?" As I spoke, I realized I wasn't just history's latest punchline. I was the active target of a coordinated effort. Every fake interview, every rumor, pointed to someone desperate to shape the narrative before the truth caught up. As we talked, Natalie told me about her own run-ins with the Highland Park elites, the rejection, the snide remarks, the closed doors. If anyone understood my situation, she did. That evening, she promised, "I'll dig into the legal records, see what's real and what's noise." For the first time, I felt a twinge of hope. Back at the mansion, Drew and Mrs. Sullivan organized another meeting, this time in the wood-paneled library far away from prying eyes. I snuck close enough to catch whispered words: disqualification, leaked files, contact the board. Their voices shook. They'd started with insults. Now they plotted with urgency. I checked my watch. County fair in less than a week. The deadline loomed. Just before bed, my phone buzzed again. Natalie sent over an email she'd uncovered. Written by a Sullivan lawyer, it was stamped with a timestamp from 2 days before the will was read. Recommend asset freeze. Push Ortiz out. I stared at it, understanding that the conspiracy was bigger than just mean-spirited gossip. I toggled through files I'd taken over the years, pictures of mansion documents, receipts, even a schedule from last year's garden party penciled in Mrs. Sullivan's careful script. Suddenly, old details started connecting in my mind. Dates overlapped, people meeting behind closed doors. The air in my room felt thick with secrets. The humiliation still burned, but it was changing. Every social media jab, every whispered rumor became motivation. What was meant to devastate me instead widened my view. If they played dirty, I'd play smart. I composed a new post for my own feed. You may know my name today, but you don't know my story. Not yet. It got exactly 12 likes, mostly from distant cousins and the local youth pastor. Not much, but enough to remind me there were still eyes rooting for honesty. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I made a promise. They could spread all the false statements they wanted, organize as many meetings as they wished, but I wouldn't back down. Not when I owed it to my mother to honor our story. Not when the American dream was so close I could practically taste it through the haze of scandal and spite. What none of them realized? I was starting to learn just how tough I could be when my back was against the wall. And with allies like Natalie, the truth might just have a fighting chance. Some stories get written in boardrooms or behind mansion doors. Mine picked up speed over steaming cups at a crowded Dallas cafe. I met Natalie Cruz again that morning, her eyes darting from one stranger to another as if every face might be allied with the Sullivan crowd. The hum of conversation, clinking spoons, and the scent of burnt coffee filled the air. None of it could drown out the tension. Natalie leaned in, her voice low. "They're going to try to freeze everything before the Dallas County Fair. You need more than rumors. You need facts." A wave of gratitude washed over me. Here was someone who saw me as more than a headline or a scandal's side effect. She pulled out her laptop and opened an encrypted folder. "Check this out. I got a hold of a private email sent from Sullivan's lawyer to a board member. They're mapping out your disqualification." I stared at the screen. There was my name, bolded out, and next to it, a timestamp. 4 days before the will was read. Prevent Ortiz from accessing assets. Push press coverage on his questionable background. My chest went tight. The conspiracy wasn't just hearsay. It was operational. Natalie's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up an old group chat where Mrs. Sullivan, Drew, and a local attorney swapped strategies. Words blurred as emotions pulsed in my head. Block banking transactions, spread anonymous tips to the observer, set background check as urgent. For the first time, I saw how deep their planning went, how methodical the exclusion really was. Over our mugs, Natalie scribbled notes. "If you want a fighting chance," she said, "you'll need allies who know how these systems work. The Dallas courts, local journalists, even people at the IRS. The sheer scale of it felt overwhelming, like trying to clear an overgrown lot armed only with garden shears. Still, I'd always thrived working in the dirt. Why not in documents? Leaving the cafe, I replayed every word in my head. Back at the mansion, the staff eyed me with a mix of sympathy and uncertainty. Mrs. Sullivan shot me a frosty look, her tone sharper than ever. "Don't think for a second," she hissed. "That press will be on your side. I nodded, keeping quiet, hiding the urge to respond. I'd learned enough to know sometimes patience outlasts power. Later, Natalie sent me another message. I just spoke to a paralegal friend. They're leaking your supposed history to every local reporter they know. Someone's pushing hard to spin your story. It all came together. The fake interviews, doctored rumors, suffocating sense of isolation. Locking myself in my room, I sorted through a chaotic pile of old garden party schedules, notes Mr. Sullivan had left behind, my own pay stubs from landscaping jobs across Highland Park. Something would connect. Something had to. Natalie called that night from Channel 8's newsroom, the background noise of anchors rehearsing and printers whirring into the late hours. Our producers like your angle, Javier. They want the real story, the system against you, not just the family drama. Her voice sounded excited, almost defiant. But it's risky. If you go public, you'll get allies and enemies. I walked out on the mansion patio to clear my head. The night sky over Dallas glimmered. Stars, stadium lights from a distant football game, the faint neon glow from a county fair billboard. In the humid silence, I sifted through my thoughts, picking at painful memories and unexpected sparks of hope. I dialed my mom, who told me in Spanish, "You have the right to be here. Show them." Next morning, Natalie arrived at the mansion with a stack of papers. "This might help your case. Social Security records, banking statements, even a garden ledger Mr. Sullivan kept. There's a legal trail here. If the Sullivans play the system, you play smarter." Each document came with a timestamp or address, a trail of American bureaucracy that, for once, felt like a lifeline. I spent the day learning. Natalie explained how lawyers and accountants spun facts, tax forms, Social Security histories, back-channel communications. The evidence wasn't obvious, but the patterns were there. "Look at this," she said, highlighting an entry. 2 asset transfers minutes before the board meeting. They're hiding something. The urgency pulsed through the walls of the mansion. Deadline before the Dallas County Fair. Mrs. Sullivan upped the ante. Another round of threats, another push for financial hold. I kept my head down, filed every document, watched for contradictions. Hook. What I saw next in the ledger turned everything upside down. Buried in Mr. Sullivan's records, a receipt with a handwritten note. For Javi, courage above all. The year matched the last private garden party we'd shared. A day when he'd told me, "You're part of this family now." Maybe the world didn't see it, but those words kept me upright. With the county fair looming and schemes swirling, I realized the system wasn't just a set of rules or paperwork. It was a battlefield, and I finally had a weapon. When Natalie smiled, I understood. I could win this, not by shouting, but by showing undeniable proof. What those plotting hadn't counted on. Sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free, it turns the tables when you least expect it. If there's one thing I learned growing up in Dallas, it's that real stories don't stay buried for long. Not in this city, not in this family. My search for truth began early, in the back halls of the mansion and the bureaucratic maze that keeps ordinary folks in check. Now, with every passing day, the deadline for the Dallas County Fair drew closer, and so did the stakes. Natalie and I made our way downtown, weaving past the morning hustle to a worn old building with gold lettering, Social Security Administration. The clerk's nameplate read Regina, and she peered up at me with the same skepticism I'd faced all my life. "Official documentation only," she said. "No room for pleasantries." I handed her the papers Natalie lent me, inheritance forms, pay stubs, even a garden ledger. While we waited, Natalie whispered, "Don't let them intimidate you. The system's built to wear you down." Her words reminded me of my mother's advice when I was a kid. Patience with paperwork, caution with signatures. I glanced at the clock. Every minute mattered. Regina returned holding a slim folder. The numbers matched. Social Security history, wage records, proof of my work since the day I turned 16. "You've been on their books a long time," she said, voice softening. I scanned the entries, years of landscaping and odd jobs neatly catalogued. The true record, cold, unbiased, undeniable. From there, we walked over to First Dallas Bank. The marble floors glistened, echoing my sneakers, always the odd man out next to wingtips and heels. The teller behind the counter, a nervous young man in a blue shirt, nearly fumbled my paperwork. "You're looking for archived records?" he asked. "That'll take some digging." Natalie flashed her press badge, and suddenly, paperwork moved faster. We sat in a stuffy cubicle as digital records loaded. Transfers, deposits, all those small entries that proved I wasn't just some outsider. "Here," Natalie pointed. "Look at this contract from 3 years ago. Landscaping services, Sullivan Estate, signed by George Sullivan. Reference for future inheritance consideration." My palm sweated over the printout. Mr. Sullivan hadn't just employed me. He'd set things in writing, long before the scandal. Hook. Every digit, every signature carried more weight than 1,000 rumors. Back at the mansion, I spread out the paperwork over my bed. Pages of numbers, signatures, and dates. Drew burst in, face red. "You really think this makes you family? Those records just make you paid help." His words stung, but I saw through the anger. It was fear, pure and simple. "Maybe I was help," I said quietly, "but now I have proof, real proof." Natalie helped sort the files by timestamp. She taught me how to read contracts, spotting the subtle moves people use to hide assets. "See this?" She traced a transfer dated 2 months before Mr. Sullivan's will was updated. "It looks like someone moved money. Could be legit, or maybe not." With every entry, the system's complexity revealed its cracks. Who knew the IRS's coded abbreviations could hold so many secrets? That afternoon, my mother came by carrying 2 boxes of old receipts and handwritten notes. At first, it annoyed me, her insistence on documenting every moment as if she'd always known this fight would come. But when I got bored and turned one box over, something caught my eye. Mr. Sullivan's name scrawled in looping script, a thank you note from a decade ago. It mattered. It changed things. The mansion buzzed with tension. Mrs. Sullivan paraded through the halls, barking instructions. "Shred everything that looks out of place," she ordered staff. I slipped into the office while she ranted and scanned the computer's recycling bin. Emails about asset redistribution and meeting delays filled the screen. I copied what I could, heart pounding with every mouse click. Natalie called from the newsroom. "The Observer's running their piece, but I think we're ahead. If you find property deeds, insurance papers, anything, send scans." I paced my room, racking my memory for places Mr. Sullivan might have hidden records. One came back, the upstairs safe behind an oil painting. Late that night, with Drew asleep and Mrs. Sullivan out at a charity dinner, I tiptoed upstairs. The safe combo came easy. It was Mr. Sullivan's birthday, a memory I'd tucked away out of respect. Inside, 2 bank statements, a copy of the updated will, and a folder labeled, "To Javier, in case of trouble." My hands shook as I opened it. His letter, wrinkled but legible, said, "If you're reading this, I trust you know why. Don't let them erase you. Hook." Until that moment, I'd never realized Mr. Sullivan had fought for me long before I was ready for this battle. I scanned everything into my laptop, eyes watering for reasons I couldn't name. The stack of documents proved where I'd come from, why I belonged. Not maybe or allegedly. Proof written and archived in the heart of Dallas. With deadlines approaching and antagonists circling closer, I finally felt armed. Sometimes power doesn't come from the noise of a crowd. It comes from silent signatures, from details nobody pays attention to until it's too late. What they didn't expect? The roots they tried to hide had been growing strong the whole time. There's a peculiar electricity in the air at the Dallas County Fair. Music, fried dough, the low roar of neighbors catching up, small-town pride at its peak. But beneath the surface, tension was thicker than Texas humidity, especially this year. The community didn't just come to see blue ribbons and prize pigs. They came for a show, and I was at the center. As I arrived, the sun blazed down on the fairgrounds. Pop-up tents and Ferris wheel shadows, the scent of barbecue wafting through the crowds. I kept my documents pressed tight to my chest, the proof I'd gathered now more precious than any trophy. Natalie met me near the entry gate, her brow furrowed with anticipation. "They're here, Javi," she warned. "The Sullivans, the press, even a couple of board members from the Homeowners Association. Everyone's waiting for your next move. I scanned the crowd. Sure enough, Mrs. Sullivan stood by the main stage, flanked by Drew and their army of supporters. Their faces said it all: determination, apprehension, and just a flicker of fear. The organizers introduced me, their voices shaky but polite. Let's welcome Javier Ortiz, representing the new generation of Highland Park. The crowd offered a mix of applause, murmurs, and more than a few hostile stares. The opening ceremony unfolded like clockwork. Politicians shaking hands, performers belting out bluegrass and country tunes, and the smell of freshly mowed grass covering up the evidence of last night's rain. But underneath the festival chatter, whispers multiplied. He's just the gardener's kid. How could George leave everything to him? The old rumors smelled stronger than the corn dogs frying on the midway. Then, as the main event began, a ribbon cutting marking the fair's 100th year, a hush fell. I was handed the microphone and my pulse went wild. It's not often that someone from my side of Dallas addresses Highland Park royalty, let alone does so with the world watching. I took a deep breath, gazed at faces across the generations, kids slurping sodas, elders shading their eyes from the sun, reporters fiddling with their phones. "Thank you," I said, voice steady, "for the chance to speak today." Behind me, Mrs. Sullivan's scowl deepened. "I stand here," I continued, my accent soft but my words sharp, "because sometimes the American dream isn't about where you start. It's about what you choose to do when the world throws stones." I unclipped my folder, holding up a sheaf of stamped contracts and letters. "I'm not here because of rumors. I'm here because Mr. Sullivan wrote it down. He wanted it known that hard work means something in Highland Park." There was a ripple of discomfort. Someone in the audience called out, "Prove it." My hand shook just a bit, but I didn't back down. "Here's my employment record, pay stubs, bank transfers, will updates. If you doubt my place, you can see it in black and white." I flashed the crowd copies, inviting the skeptics forward. Natalie stood at the edge of the stage holding her phone, recording every word. The press surged. Cameras pointed my way. Drew whispered furiously while Mrs. Sullivan glanced at her lawyer, whose face had gone white as the contracts. Then came the most important twist. I held up the letter I'd found in the safe. "And here's a note Mr. Sullivan left, in his own handwriting. To Javier, courage above all. You're part of this family now. Don't let them erase you." The crowd went silent. No more accusations, just the shock of a truth too strong to ignore. Hook. For a moment, time froze. You could hear only the whir of cameras and the distant cheers from a winning pie-eating contest. Suddenly, a commotion near the front as a member of the board demanded to verify the documents. I handed them over. No fear, only resolve. The official turned pages, lips pursed. After a long pause, she said into the mic, "The records check out. Mr. Ortiz is the rightful heir." That announcement set off a ripple effect. Some folks cheered, others shook their heads. Drew stormed off, muttering about family loyalty. Mrs. Sullivan gathered her things, dignity fraying at the edges. As I stepped down from the stage, Natalie squeezed my arm, whispering, "You just made history." Empathy hit hard when I spotted my mother by the lemonade stand, eyes shining with pride. We hugged, right there, in view of everyone who'd ever doubted me. Some strangers gave nods of respect. Others clearly didn't know what to think. As the county fair's sounds returned, kids shouting, games restarting, I realized I'd just flipped the script. The town had shown up for spectacle but witnessed something deeper. The public face of a private struggle finally brought into the sun. What nobody expected. I wasn't going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. The county fair was supposed to be the turning point. But back at the mansion under the blazing Texas sun, I learned every resolution brings another round of secrets. Victory in public does little to heal what's broken in private. The Sullivans weren't finished. Far from it. The aftermath of the fair left a strange quiet hanging over the house. Staff tiptoed through parquet hallways, whispering about what went down at the main stage. I caught Mrs. Sullivan in the kitchen arguing with Drew, voices low but clipped. "He thinks he's won," she said, "but this isn't over." I kept my head down, focusing on my documents. Insurance papers, Mr. Sullivan's will. A neatly folded note in Spanish my mother tucked into my backpack. Outside, the sun bore down on the rose garden where it all began. I trimmed stems and tried to clear my mind, but voices from the patio kept drifting in. Cousins gathered for damage control, each desperate to preserve status. Some ignored me, others glared as if I'd stolen something sacred. Natalie texted, "Be careful, they're meeting in secret tonight." She was right. I watched cars arrive, luxury sedans parking in shadows as relatives filed in for what looked like a family summit. Mrs. Sullivan led the way, posture rigid, determination flickering in every gesture. Inside, tension ran high. An aunt whispered, "We trusted him, and he betrayed us." Drew chimed in, "You saw the documents. He played the system." Their words stung but revealed brand new fault lines. The more they tried to unify, the more they exposed cracks. Some cousins took my side, quietly defending my right to inherit, insisting Mr. Sullivan's wishes should be honored. In the living room, conflict flared. Wine glasses clinked nervously. An old uncle mumbled, "If anyone asks, blame the lawyer." For the first time, I saw the conspiracy fracturing from within, trust dissolving. Mrs. Sullivan desperately tried to hold the group together, but jealousy and ambition split the ranks. I found myself outside by the grill, listening to family stories that both warmed and chilled. My mother joined me, squeezing my hand, her eyes full of sadness and unwavering love. "Things will settle, Javi. Truth changes everything, even if it hurts." We sat together watching the sun sink beyond the rooftops, colors melting into the horizon. Hook, when everyone has secrets, peace is out of reach. Midnight approached as whispers turned into arguments behind closed doors. One cousin, Maggie, slipped quietly into the study and handed me a photograph. A younger Mr. Sullivan at a backyard barbecue, arm around my mother, both smiling. "She kept this for years," Maggie said. "It means something." Empathy rippled through the house. The Sullivans weren't villains, just wounded people struggling with change. Yet their schemes threatened everyone's peace, from the youngest grandchildren confused by arguments to distant relatives caught in gossip's web. I thought of the family dinners Mr. Sullivan hosted, the way he'd say, "We're all branches on the same tree," but lately the roots looked tangled with regret and resentment. Natalie called late, voice urgent. Drew might flip. He's upset with how harsh his mom's been. If the group splits, you could finally get all their secrets. It was a twist I hadn't expected. A possible ally deep inside the opposition. By sunrise, the mansion was quieter. Some family members left for work, others lingered anxiously. I stepped out on the patio, eyes lingering on roses and the memory of last night. A family divided, hearts open in fear and hope. I couldn't rest. I spent the morning reconciling files, piecing timelines together. Bank statements matched meeting dates. Gift receipts merged with letters from Mr. Sullivan. Patterns emerged, proof of how the inheritance wasn't just money but a complicated legacy of promises and secrets. The final piece came when Drew approached me in the backyard, eyes tired. "I'm not proud of what's happening," he admitted, "but Mom's always been afraid. Maybe it's time we stop fighting." That moment didn't erase all the pain, but it opened the door to healing. Hook. Loyalty is fragile, but truth lights up even the darkest corners. With the sun setting again over Highland Park, I realized my fight was never just for assets. It was for dignity, restoration, a place to belong. The Sullivans might never be whole again, but for the first time, real conversations began. And just when it seemed like the storm had passed, Natalie texted one more time. "The next board meeting is tomorrow. Everything could change. Stay sharp." What nobody realized? When secrets boil over, even old rivalries can turn into alliances. The next morning felt like the calm before a storm that nobody could stop. The Sullivan mansion bustled with nervous energy. Staff polished silverware as the family prepared for the big board meeting. But this gathering wasn't about charity auctions or garden parties. It was all business, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Natalie arrived early, her camera bag slung across her shoulder. "We go big today," she said. "Everything comes out." I nodded, sense of urgency pulsing in my veins. My allies were ready. Drew had slipped me more emails, old threads showing attempts to freeze assets, bad-mouthing me to board members, even faked character reports. These were the loose wires to spark the fire. As board members settled into plush chairs around the polished table, Mrs. Sullivan took charge, her tone sharper than a spreadsheet. "Let's be clear. Javier does not represent our legacy. We're acting for the good of Highland Park." Instantly, the room split. Some nodded in agreement, others shifted uncomfortably, recalling the fair's confrontation. The tension was unbearable. I held my folder tight, the documents inside heavier than gold. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, honesty, and the right to belong. My mother texted, "Por tu valor, hijo." Speak with your heart. Her words steadied me. Natalie gave me the cue. I stood up, heart pounding, and began a live stream on social media. This was how stories traveled now. Not through newspapers, but through shares, likes, and real-time community engagement. "I'm not here to divide this family," I began, "but the truth can't stay silent any longer." I laid out my evidence, emails, contracts, even screenshots from board members plotting in private. I have the records, pay stubs, banking forms, notes from Mr. Sullivan himself, proof that my place here isn't an accident. It was a choice. As I spoke, comments flooded the stream. "Go Javier! Expose them!" Some posts came from people I didn't even know, from students, landscapers, others who'd faced their own battles for acceptance. Natalie turned the camera to the board. "Do you refute these documents?" An uncomfortable silence followed. One member adjusted his glasses, another tapped her phone. Mrs. Sullivan stiffened, lips pursed, but said nothing. The evidence spoke louder than any denial. Hook. The clip went viral within minutes. By the end of my speech, the community was engaged. Reporters tweeted in real time. Local channels updated headlines. Some praised my courage, others criticized the Sullivans for misappropriation of family trust. Drew, visibly torn, apologized to me in public. "I never meant for things to get this ugly," he said. The words felt honest, and for the first time, the family's unity wavered. Empathy swept over the mansion. Several staff members voiced support, sharing stories of Mr. Sullivan's generosity, the way he welcomed outsiders, the real spirit of Highland Park. My mother joined the stream, speaking softly in Spanish and English. "We all deserve a place. Thank you for letting my son be heard." Tears blurred my vision. Her pride burned hotter than any resentment I'd faced. Word spread beyond Dallas. Supporters from Houston, Austin, even the Mexican-American community across the state shared the feed. Neighbors I'd worked for over the years posted messages. Javi always helped us, even when he didn't have to. The mansion's Wi-Fi lit up, notifications like fireworks. But not everyone was moved. Mrs. Sullivan scrambled, calling her lawyer, huddling with allies who demanded damage control. The board wavered. Some wanted to bury the story. Others realized that transparency was now expected. In a final twist, Natalie uploaded a file. Receipts for every estate maintenance job I'd ever done, with timestamps and pay rates. All legal, all above board. The truth sat wide open, impossible to ignore. Hug. Likes couldn't buy courage, but they multiplied justice. By the meeting's end, the board acknowledged my documentation. An official statement was read. Mr. Ortiz's inheritance stands. The process was legitimate. The community will honor Mr. Sullivan's wishes. As calm returned, I hugged my mother and thanked Drew. We weren't best friends, but for a moment, we were family. Mrs. Sullivan left quietly, shoulders bent. Not ruined, but changed. Reporters outside swarmed as I exited. "You think you won?" one asked. I shrugged, feeling exhausted and grateful. "I think the truth won. That counts for everything." Community members rallied, organizing a block party in my honor. The Sullivans weren't banned. They were welcomed, invited to mend wounds. That night, I felt the power of social exposure, the chance for dignity, redemption, and a new beginning. What the schemers never understood, public exposure isn't just punishment, it's a window for healing. Justice in Highland Park wasn't something handed down in a courtroom. It unfolded in living rooms, over block parties, in the nitty-gritty of neighborhood conversations. When the dust settled, I felt like I was walking through someone else's dream. I'd never seen the Sullivan Mansion so alive and honest. Rumor had faded, replaced by real talk, and for the first time, truth felt like home. The aftermath of social exposure brought a wave of reactions. Some Sullivan relatives stayed away, bruised by the confrontation, but others, like Drew, returned, sheepish, recognizing that protecting secrets did more harm than good. Drew met me in the hallway. "I blew it, Javi," he admitted, "but maybe this mess did us a favor. Mom's seeing things different. Everything's changed." Natalie arrived early, camera in hand, ready to document the next chapter. "People need to see the healing, not just the scandal," she said. At her suggestion, we invited the entire family, blood and adopted, old rivals and new friends, to gather on the mansion's wide lawn. There was no agenda, just an open invitation. Come as you are, leave as you wish. My mother set up a table of homemade treats, pan dulce beside brownies and lemonade. She greeted every guest with warmth, bridging old divides with gentle conversation. Slowly, relatives mingled, staff members joined, and neighbors wandered in with their kids. Main Street buzzed with real interest, not judgment. "Glad you made it," I said to a cousin I hadn't seen since middle school. Hook. The shame became public, but the justice was personal. As food disappeared and stories flowed, Natalie recorded interviews, candid moments of vulnerability. Mrs. Sullivan watched from a window upstairs, her posture less rigid, eyes softer than I remembered. Near dusk, she finally joined us on the lawn. Her apology was awkward, but it mattered. "You're braver than I gave you credit for, Javier. I was wrong." Drew hugged her, and for the first time in months, his face relaxed. Empathy filled the air, winding through every conversation. We remembered Mr. Sullivan, his fondness for cookouts, his belief in second chances, his quiet generosity. One neighbor told the crowd, "He always told me, truth finds its way." People nodded, letting go of old grudges. The American dream meant more here than big houses. It was about acceptance. Later, as the sun dipped, I led a walk down Main Street. Friends, family, and strangers fell in step, smiling, waving to folks peering from porches. It felt like every anxious night, every public humiliation, had built to this. A moment when reputation didn't matter as much as respect. The block party turned into an impromptu celebration, with music pouring from windows, kids chasing each other in the twilight. The press made noise, but we weren't putting on a show. Justice happened quietly. A word of thanks, an honest apology, a shared laugh over old misunderstandings. It was messy, slow, and so much more real than any headline. As darkness deepened, the group gathered in the mansion's living room. Mrs. Sullivan handed me a box of family keepsakes, photos, letters, documents I'd never seen. "If you're family, you deserve all the pieces. I'm sorry for everything," she said. And the room exhaled together. No dramatic declarations, no closing arguments, just the slow, patient rebuilding of trust. Hook. Dignity was restored, not by winning, but by changing hearts. When the last guest waved goodbye, I stood on the porch with my mom, arms wrapped around each other, watching the street quiet down. "You did it, mijo. You didn't have to fight alone," she whispered. Natalie offered one last interview, but I shook my head, ready for softer moments. "The story's yours now," she said, smiling, "but the ending belongs to all of us." It struck me then. The Sullivan legacy wasn't about land or money. It was about the people who could change, the neighbors who chose to forgive, the simple power of showing up and telling the truth. What Highland Park learned. Reputation can be rebuilt, but character, earned in hardship, proven in kindness, sticks forever. If my journey through the Sullivan legacy has taught me anything, it's that the American dream isn't inherited. It's created, lived, and sometimes rebuilt from scratch. Weeks after the dust settled, Highland Park felt both familiar and impossibly new. The roses in our garden bloomed brighter, The mansion, once tense, now echoed with laughter and honest conversation. The story of the scandal faded into legend. Neighbors joked about the gardener who conquered Main Street, but underneath, their respect was real. Drew and I started meeting every Saturday morning, coffee in hand, talking not about money but about ways to help the community. Natalie, ever the storyteller, captured our efforts for local news, showing how rebuilding wasn't just a one-person job. Hook. In Dallas, even old traditions can blossom into something redemptive. My mother moved into a sunny room near the garden. Her presence brought warmth. She organized potlucks and Spanish lessons, teaching neighborhood kids and old Sullivan friends how to prepare pan dulce or greet folks with buenos dias. The house had never buzzed with so much hopeful energy. A few weeks later, a community meeting filled the local center to capacity. Mrs. Sullivan spoke softly, her words full of regret and determination. Javier showed me that family means more than heritage. It means heart, resilience, and truth. The crowd applauded, not out of obligation but genuine admiration. The legacy Mr. Sullivan left became more than assets. It became a platform for new beginnings. With support from the Block Party, I founded Roots and Wings, a nonprofit for youth facing exclusion and families hit by social or bureaucratic setbacks. Drew volunteered, leading mentorship sessions for teens. Natalie helped us secure grants. Even former rivals pitched in, sharing skills and stories. Empathy was the glue. One family sent a note. "Your courage made us rethink everything. Can we join your garden program?" Others donated unused bikes, kitchen supplies, textbooks. Almost overnight, community outreach became mainstream in Highland Park. The American dream, once a guarded privilege, was shared openly, cultivated in gardens and classrooms. Hook. Legacy means nothing if it's built on secrets, everything if it's shared. As winter rolled in, I stood outside the mansion with my mom, Drew, and a dozen volunteers, planting new rose bushes under frosty stars. Natalie filmed the ceremony for Channel 8, telling viewers, "This is what real change looks like." Kids waved, families sang, laughter floated above the cold. Reputation had changed, sure, but so had I. No longer the outsider, I became a neighbor, a mentor, sometimes just a friend. The shame and struggle that marked last summer became a story of transformation, one that would be retold at every Thanksgiving, every homecoming event, every small-town parade. Mrs. Sullivan, brave and changed, hosted a fundraiser for Roots and Wings. She looked at me and said simply, "Thank you for saving our family." Her gesture wasn't grand, but it meant everything. Empathy, truth, and second chances. That's the new American dream I found and fought for. It's about standing up in public, speaking your story, and daring to believe in redemption when everyone says it's impossible. Late one night, as Main Street glowed with holiday lights, I thought about the journey. Not just the scandal, the humiliation, or even the justice, but the hope I now saw in my mother's eyes, the certainty that we belonged, and that, in Dallas, is how you build a legacy worth passing on. What I learned: roots give you stability, wings give you freedom, and family, chosen or given, makes the dream real. If this story moved you, made you rethink what family and resilience can mean, then don't let the journey end here. Hit that subscribe button and become part of our community that celebrates second chances and real courage. Drop a like if you believe the American dream lives on in stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice and experience add power and meaning to every chapter we create together. Let's keep growing, learning, and changing for the better. One story, one comment at a time.